Greenland is the world's largest island and 500 years ago was home to a Viking colony. But in the 1500s, the colony suddenly collapsed and the Vikings were never seen again. What caused the collapse of this outpost of Viking culture? Was it poverty, famine, or war with the natives? Today we will see what caused the collapse of this frozen Viking outpost. This is Knowledge Voyage.
But before this video starts, don't forget to hit subscribe and hit the bell so that you can get all of our weekly videos about history. Thank you.
The Vikings reached the New World in 1000 AD thanks to Leif Erikson, and we have a video on this which you may find interesting. During their settlement of North America, Vikings also settled Greenland. Famously, Vikings on Iceland were told that it was a quote, green land that they could settle, in contrast to the ecologically damaged Iceland. And this attempt to encourage Viking settlement to Greenland worked. The Vikings set up a sizable colony on Greenland and made a lucrative living trading walrus tusks to European markets. It seemed that the Vikings would turn Greenland into a thriving outpost of Norse culture, but then disaster struck. From the 1300s onwards, the colony began to decline. Archaeologists have found that bodies in the cemetery were getting smaller, a sign of poverty or even famine. The Vikings also began to talk of wars with the Skrælings, largely believed to refer to the Inuit people, with whom the Vikings had at least once been trading peacefully with. By the 1400s, the colony was in deep decline, and a letter to the Pope complained that, quote, heathens had destroyed the Viking church in raids, and there had been no bishop in Greenland for 30 years. It's somewhat ironic that the Vikings, who were once famous in their pagan days for raids on churches, were now the victims of church raids by, quote, pagans themselves. The, quote, heathens in question were almost certainly Inuit polytheists. In 1540, a European ship found the body of a Viking man on a beach in Greenland, and this man would be the last known Viking on Greenland. So what happened? How did Greenland go from being a successful Viking colony to a collapsed and abandoned wilderness? There are three main causes. The first was ivory. When the Vikings first settled Greenland, they could hunt walruses and sell their tusks back to European markets. But as ivory from Africa and India began to enter the European market, the Viking walruses could no longer compete. This led many Vikings to leave and go back to Europe, causing a smaller and less stable population to remain on Greenland. The second issue was weather. We know from ice core analysis that a so-called Little Ice Age hit the Earth in the early Middle Ages. This ice age would have caused two fatal impacts on the Greenland Norse. Firstly, it would have clogged the seas between Greenland and Europe for months at a time, effectively cutting off the Vikings from both trade and supplies. Secondly, the ice age would have devastated farming on Greenland, and there is evidence that farm animals got smaller and smaller, as less grass was available to feed them in this little ice age. Viking bodies examined on Greenland also show signs of malnutrition, and as the sea lanes froze, money dried up, and food became scarce, the final blow was war with the Inuit. The Vikings were mighty warriors, but the Inuit had several advantages. Mainly, they were used to extreme winters in a way the Vikings were not, and as food became scarce, it is likely both groups fought violently for control over what little was left. In short, three things destroyed the Vikings on Greenland. Firstly, the cash maker of walrus ivory was destroyed through competition from Africa and Asia. Secondly, the Little Ice Age cut the Vikings off from Europe and caused food shortages. And thirdly, as the food shortages hit hard, raids from the Inuit increased in intensity. Facing the combination of economic decline, famine, and constant danger, the Viking settlement on Greenland finally died out. But in later centuries, Denmark, in the early days of its empire, sent a mission to recolonize Greenland. Greenland to this day remains a dependency of Denmark, having a similar relationship to Denmark that Puerto Rico does to the USA or the Channel Islands do to the UK. So, whilst the Vikings may have lost Greenland, their descendants would eventually retake it, albeit the Danish population of Greenland is very small. But had the Little Ice Age not hit, perhaps the Vikings would have made Greenland every bit as Norse as Scandinavia itself.
Thanks for watching everyone, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Thank you.